Afternoon, everyone. We are at 2 o'clock, so we are going to go on ahead and get started. My name is Dr. Tina Lewandowski, and I am the Director of Engagement here at the ADRC. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Today, we have a presentation from Dr. Jacqueline Palmer. Dr. Palmer completed her dual clinical and research doctoral program, earning her Doctor of Physical Therapy and Ph.D. in Biomechanics and Movement Sciences. Dr. Palmer's primary research interests involve neuromechanical control of balance and walking and factors that enhance and preserve brain function over the course of aging, such as physical activity and exercise training. She is currently a postdoctoral fellow at KUMC studying brain blood flow and neural functioning for balance and mobility control with aging. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Palmer. Just a friendly reminder to everyone to please keep your microphones on mute, and if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them in the chat. And we will leave plenty of time for questions at the end of the presentation, and Dr. Palmer can address them at the time. As always, we will have the recording available on our website within 24 hours. Dr. Palmer, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, let's see here.
And we can see your screen and your presentation.
All right. Sounds good. So I'll go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for having me on today and listening to a little bit about my research and kind of the area of research I've been involved in recently at the University of Kansas Medical Center. So today I just want to really briefly define what neuroplasticity is in terms of how we study it, and summarize techniques that we're currently using to measure changes in brain function during behaviors. I'll also provide a couple examples of what we call brain training involving balance control that really capitalize on principles of neuroplasticity. And then I also want to discuss this new direction that we're going in our research, looking at how brain blood flow and exercise might influence brain function and neuroplasticity with aging. So briefly, what is neuroplasticity? This is probably a word you may have heard of in the popular press or science media. It's kind of a buzzword right now, but really what neuroplasticity is from a technical standpoint is referring to this capacity of our nervous system to change. And this is actually a normal ongoing state of your nervous system all the time. So whether you like it or not, by you listening in on this talk, I'm actually changing your nervous system right now because you are going to have formed new memories of at least having attended this talk, even if you don't remember any of the content I talked about today. But you will form that new memory, and that formation of the new memory is actually because of processes of neuroplasticity that are ongoing in your brain. So this is actually an ongoing state of the nervous system really all the time. And so whenever you hear something in the popular press, like this is, promoting neuroplasticity, or there are changes in neuroplastic changes, just be really wary that your brain is always undergoing states of neuroplasticity. So really, we have to get into the nuance scientifically of what exactly that means and what neuroplastic changes might be good and what might be associated with poor outcomes that we actually care about. And so neuroplasticity is actually really important in the context of brain damage. For example, after stroke, we see that other brain regions that were not directly affected by the stroke can take over some of that function that the damaged brain regions were once responsible for. And this is true in other disease contexts as well in the brain. And it also appears to be happening with neurodegeneration in the brain that occurs with aging. Especially in Parkinson's disease, there's some research coming out that some of these neurodegenerative changes in the side of the brain that might be more affected initially by diseases like Parkinson's disease and development of some dementias. The other side of the brain actually has heightened states of neuroplasticity, and it's thought that it's actually compensating for some of that degeneration that's happening. And so this is a really remarkable capacity of the brain to remodel itself, rewire itself, and it's very protective for the preservation of these behaviors and for you going on living your life in the state of any change that that happens in your brain or in your neural tissue. And so we can measure neuroplasticity. One way we can measure it is by measuring neuron talk. And so we can measure neuron talk in our lab with this technology called electroencephalography. It's not a new technology. It's been around for quite a long time. In the popular press, if you have heard of references to brain waves, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about these EEG recordings of brain activity. But essentially what this is you can see on this adorable little human here, they actually have a lot of electrodes on their head, and those electrodes act like little microphones, and they actually pick up brain activity in addition to a lot of other things. But one thing that they pick up on is brain activity and the neurons in different regions of the brain talking to each other. Does someone have a question, or is it just a microphone? Okay. So what is the best driver for these neuroplastic changes in the brain? So this is actually so the answer is it's your behavior. So your behavior is the most powerful known driver for neuroplasticity in the brain. And this is what we do in the field of physical therapy, is we actually leverage this really powerful property of neuroplasticity, and we change the brain through behavioral interventions. And so in one study that I have been involved in, we actually looked at the neuron talk in the brain during the brain's recovery from a disturbance in standing balance that we delivered. So essentially what we did is we had someone standing on this force platform. Oh wait, and you can see. We had someone standing on this force platform here, and oh shoot, it's not going to let me play my video. And I'm going to play this video of what this looks like, but we actually pull the plate that they're standing on from under their feet. We don't try to have them lose their balance in a way that they're unable to recover, but it does challenge the brain and the body in a way that they have to respond to correct that balance disturbance. And so here you can see we're actually moving the platform forward. And we can measure a lot of different things. As you can see, this person instrumented in our setup here. So we're measuring their brain activity with EEG. We're also measuring their muscle activity. We're measuring their body motion. They actually have retroreflective markers taped all over them. So we can measure the exact way their body is moving and to respond to this balance disruption. And we can measure the forces in that plate from under their feet as well. But I'm just going to focus in on the brain activity here. So what we see in response to this movement of the plate is the person's brain activity lights up. And you can see that here. Typically, we see that over, if we're looking down at the head from above, you can see the nose here, and you can see a region of the brain right in the middle there. That's where your sensory and motor regions in your brain are located. And those regions light up to respond to that disturbance in your balance. And you can see that here in that evoked activity in the cortex that we can measure. You can also see the muscle activity coming on and the muscle in the front of the leg, the tibialis anterior. You can see the center of pressure and center of mass, their body motion shifting backwards and then correcting itself as the muscles come on, as the brain comes on to tell the muscles to turn on to correct the balance. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at with this experimental paradigm of disrupting someone's balance, and we can see how their brain is controlling that response. And so what we find is that compared to these younger individuals, where as we increase the level of the perturbation that we're delivering to them, we see brain activity in these sensory motor regions of the brain located in the middle of the mid-central region. And in older individuals, we actually see that cortical activity shifting to the front of their brain during the balance recovery response. And in the front part of your brain, that is actually where these higher brain regions involved in cognitive processes are located. And when we measure this neural talk between the front parts of your brain, the frontal regions of your brain, and those middle regions where the motor and sensory areas are, we see that older adults who have greater talk between these regions actually have more interference of cognition in their balance control. So we're actually asking them to perform a cognitive task while they're doing a balance task. And that cognition interferes with the balance control more in people who have more talk in these frontal brain regions. And then we also see that more talk in between these frontal and motor brain regions is associated with a lower capacity to respond. And so people aren't able to respond as well when they use this particular strategy involving the front parts of their cerebral cortex. And so that really brings us to the question that we're trying to answer in this new direction that we're going in our lab, which is why do some people have better brain function for balance control than other people do? And so we don't know the answer to that question, but we do know that over the course of aging, there appears to be this decline in blood flow to the brain. And it's thought that this decline in brain blood flow leads to the development of structural brain pathology that leads to neural dysfunction in the brain. And that might contribute to the neural strategy that someone's using to recover their balance in this case. And so if you were in attendance at Dr. Stacey Aaron's webinar a few weeks ago, she actually talked about this decline in brain blood flow that we observe over the course of aging. And so this study really kind of just illustrates this point when we look at brain blood flow in people in their 20s and 30s. It's higher than when we look at people in middle age and when we look at older individuals. And so this decline in brain blood flow is happening even before some of these impairments in balance and cognition are occurring. And so what we believe is happening is perhaps that this decline in brain blood flow might contribute to the neural dysfunction that eventually we're able to see manifest in some of these clinical symptoms. And so we know that there are many modifiable factors that contribute to someone's brain blood flow and their cerebrovascular health. And just one I'm going to talk about today is regular physical activity. Regular physical activity appears to be very protective for preserving blood flow to the brain over the course of aging. And so this is just one study of many that has looked at this effect. So here they actually looked at older adults who were masters athletes, so very physically active, engaging in regular exercise training, compared to sedentary individuals, sedentary older individuals, and compared to younger control individuals. And you can see that the sedentary older individuals have a very sharp decline in this cerebral blood flow, compared to the younger individuals, but this effect is really attenuated in these master athletes. And in Sandy Billinger's lab, who is the PI that whose lab I'm involved in here at KUMC, we actually found that a more robust cerebral blood flow response during aerobic exercise was associated with lower levels of amyloid beta deposition. And this is kind of a structural measure of brain health that is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. So people who have more robust blood flow response during exercise have lower amyloid beta, so better structural brain health. And I think this slide speaks for itself, but when in response to sedentary behavior or periods of inactivity, studies have observed a really sharp decline in brain blood flow across essentially every region of the brain that they have measured. So sedentary activity, while physical activity and exercise appear to be a really powerful driver for increasing brain blood flow, sedentary behavior can really quickly reduce that brain blood flow. This particular study was just as few as 10 days of sedentary behavior. They saw pretty marked reductions in brain blood flow. And so that brings me to our new brain balance study. And so we know that brain function for balance control, we know that there appear to be good strategies and bad strategies from a neurophysiologic perspective that people are using that are linked to their ability to recover balance and ultimately prevent falls, which is really what we are looking for in terms of our long-term impact on public health with this research. And we also know that those neural control strategies for balance appear to overlap with the neural strategies of control for cognition in terms of these frontal shifts in neural activity during the balance recovery response. And so the question this study is really aiming to answer is whether cerebrovascular health influences the neural strategy that people are using for balance control in the context of aging. And so here, as we talked about, we know physical activity is associated with higher brain blood flow, and we hypothesize that this higher brain blood flow will be linked to these better neural strategies that people are using and engaging to recover their balance. And we're also looking at the effect of individual genotype and whether that might influence this relationship between brain blood flow and neural control of balance that again overlaps with cognitive control. And so I'm not going to go into detail on this because Dr. Stacy Aaron, who I mentioned earlier, and Dr. Allison Whitaker, who also gave a webinar a few weeks ago, talked about our lab's use of transcranial Doppler ultrasound, where we can actually use ultrasound to look at brain blood flow through these major conduit arteries in the brain in real time while people are doing things like exercising. Like we actually have people going through an exercise protocol on a recumbent stepper machine, which you may be familiar with from the gym. The same machine, we actually are measuring brain blood flow while people are doing those same exercises as they're doing in the gym or out in the real world. So that is a pretty interesting direction for our lab. And so if this setup looks familiar to you, you may have participated in one of the studies in our lab. This is the vascular room in Sandy Billinger's lab. And if you participated in a study called, if this looks familiar to you, you may have participated in a study called Tracker, where we were measuring blood flow to your brain while you were exercising on this exercise machine. And we may be contacting you because right now we are focusing our recruitment, our ongoing recruitment for this new balance study on people who participated in that that tracker study in our lab. And we, if you had indicated on that consent form that you would be interested in being recontacted to participate in other research studies, we may be contacting you. So keep your ears open for that. And at this point, you know, I'll wrap things up and say thank you for having me, and I'll answer any questions anyone has. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Palmer, for your presentation. I will open it up to any questions that we have.
So do we have to have participated in the tracker study in order to now be a candidate for the balance study?
So yes, right now we are containing our recruitment to just that tracker group. And that's really because we have a lot of other data on that group of individuals that we're using for the study. However, we may branch out at a later time, expand our recruitment to people who didn't participate in that. But right now we are just containing it to that study.
So those who have been in the tracker study are now eligible to be in the balance study. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, most likely. We'll do another screening, but you would most likely be eligible, yes.
Oh, okay, because I have not been in the tracker study. I just finished the NICE study and I'm looking to get into something else.
Okay, yeah, and this study, this balance study is not like an intervention study. It's just a single session that you would come in.
Okay.
And the tracker study, I believe, was just a single session. It wasn't a exercise intervention study.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Dr. Palmer?
Okay, when you say exercise, is that any kind of exercise, aerobic, strength, stretch, and how long, how vigorous it should be? And would you define those master athletes?
Yeah, so that's a really good question that I think is still open for research right now. And one of the major research efforts at KUMC, I know, is to try to figure out, okay, we know exercise and movement just generally is really good for your brain in terms of your vascular health, in terms of your neural function. What we don't know is the dosing of that exercise. And what is likely true is that that optimal dosing is probably different depending on individual factors, like I mentioned, genotype, but also other individual factors. But most of the research I cited today was actually looking at aerobic type exercise. Not to say that resistance training is not having an effect on brain health. We know it certainly is for muscle preservation and prevention of muscle atrophy and frailty over the course of aging. But most of the research right now, as I understand it, is looking at aerobic exercise. And most of the research has been looking at moderate intensity exercise. And so that's typically characterized as 50 to 65% of what your age predicted heart rate maximum would be. But I think that's really open for debate. I think that as a physical therapist, what I tell people who are starting up an exercise program is that the best exercise for you is the exercise that you are going to stick with and that you enjoy. So something that you can regularly do and keep doing over the course of your life. Or, you know, it might change in different stages and phases of your life, but the important thing is the consistency of it. Because we know like 3 weeks of just really hardcore aerobic exercise training and then 3 months of not, you know, taking a break for Christmas or whatever, like I might do, that is less good in terms of brain health than sticking to something every single day and doing it for a very long period of time.
Do you suggest the HIIT exercise regimen or just any aerobic routine that we may have already been doing?
Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting research in the domain of high intensity exercise in terms of its effect on the brain. There's actually some really exciting emerging research, I would say, that shows that incorporating higher intensities in an interval structure, so not just doing high intensity for 20 continuous minutes, but doing it in an interval structure to give structured bouts of recovery. That type of training is actually showing some pretty promising effects on the brain, and not doing it every single day, but just incorporating it into perhaps a weekly routine. So maybe even doing it once a week, but doing that on a regular basis in addition to, or at least incorporating that in with your regular daily exercise routine. The findings coming out are pretty exciting to me, just looking at neural health and brain function. So yes, I would, if you could do HIIT type training in a safe and manageable way that you could stick with again on a consistent basis, like every week, once every 2 weeks, for a long period of time. I think there's no reason to not try it unless you have any other type of cardiac or medical contraindications to that type of training.
Dr. Palmer, it looks like we have another question about HIIT. Does it mean that people with heart problems, blood flow challenges, will probably have even worse blood flow in the brain and will require higher HIIT?
Higher HIIT. So people with other kind of comorbidities like heart problems, that type of thing, that I mean, there's a large span. I'm not sure if that person's thinking of something in particular that might prevent someone from engaging in regular physical exercise. But I think even people after myocardial infarction are working with clinical specialists, cardiologists, and cardiac rehab to exercise, because that appears to be important for the recovery in a very safe way where they're being monitored very closely clinically. But it's hard for me to think of a disease that prolonged periods of sedentary behavior are not going to be harmful for brain health and body health in general. So I think the key here is that what we do in physical therapy is we try to come up with safe ways that people can continue to engage in regular exercise in the presence of these comorbidities. So I think that it's really important, if you have one of these comorbidities or heart conditions, to consult with your medical provider and make it really clear to them that engaging in regular physical exercise is something you want to do, and how can I do this safely? What are the steps that we need to take together to come up with a way that I can do that for my brain health, for preservation of that, as I continue to age.
And then they also asked, are there drug solutions for blood flow issues for older adults?
That I'm going to step away from, because there are, that's a very specific clinical question. You would have to, we'd have to get some more specifics on that. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not going to speak outside of my area of expertise, but there are pharmacologic agents that people take for, vessel health, and that type of thing. But that would require a lot of, follow up with those medical diagnostics to kind of hone in on what drugs. But there's no drug that you can take. There's no exercise pill, I guess, if that's kind of what the question's probing at. There's no pill that you could, or drug that you could currently take that would just increase your blood flow to your brain in the same way that maintaining like a physically active lifestyle would. If there were, that would be a multi-billion-dollar drug, because we don't know how to do it outside of just the hard work.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, Dr. Palmer, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing this information with us. We really appreciate it. I want to let everyone know that we are using a different system to send out our weekly newsletter on Monday, so it might look just a little bit different than you've seen it in the past. So just a heads up there. And then we will see everyone next Thursday at 2 o'clock for our weekly webinar. We will not have a weekly webinar on Thanksgiving, so hopefully everyone is able to enjoy time with their family and friends. So again, that is November 24th. We will not have a weekly webinar, but we will have one next week.
Would you take one more question, please?
Dr. Palmer, can you take one more class? Hold on one second. Let me go on ahead and finish up for anyone who wants to jump off, and then we'll go on ahead and if Dr. Palmer has time, take your question. Thumbs up, Dr. Palmer. Would you have a couple more minutes? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So everyone can check the YouTube channel for our recording, which will be available in 24 hours, and you can email myalliance@kumc.edu if you have any other questions or anything to contact us about. And I'll go on ahead and turn it back over for that last question for Dr. Palmer. Lisa, did you want to go ahead and ask
yes. In one of those charts, it said the master athlete. It looks like it has a higher brain functionality. So what did you mean? How did you define master athlete?
Oh,
Is that
yeah.
for senior people, older people?
Yeah, that study, that was not my study, but one that was pretty interesting. I can give you the reference to it. It may be publicly available. That was by Thomas and colleagues. That was actually a 2013 study. But the master athlete, I'm pretty sure they defined as not the I think they defined it as anyone above the age of 65, because they were really looking at the aging population. Although from an athletic perspective, I know master can be characterized or defined as anyone over 50. But I think they were actually looking at older individuals than that. I'm not certain. I would have to go back at that on that paper, but I can see if I can find it here if you're interested.
Yeah, well, you had a chart, so there must be some criteria how they defined how much exercise, what kind of.
Yeah, let me see. So I have to go. I think that paper might be on my other machine, but it's on my other machine. But here, let me pull it up on PubMed for you. So I don't know if can I post in the chat here, or am I? Wait, are you still here? Can you see this?
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, so this is the study here. So you can go in and look at it, but this is the chart that I showed here. So they quantified cerebral blood flow as relatively speaking. So this is relative cerebral blood flow to cardiac output. But you can go in. This is freely available to you on PubMed. So you can go in and see exactly what they what these masters athletes were doing. But from what I recall, it was actually very high level. They were doing a lot of high level training. I'm not sure, they may have been cyclists or over 10 plus hours a week of physical activity, I'm pretty sure. But you can go in and see everything they detail all of that. Do you have that information, or do you want me to put it in the chat for the article?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, let me see.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer.
Let me see. How do I stop my share? Can you stop my share for me? I don't know.
Let me see if I can. There should be a
Some reason,
button.
oh, I see
Okay.
it. I see
If
it.
it's difficult, it's okay, I'll find it.
I got it. Now I need to find it. Here we go. Okay. There is the link, that PubMed article link for you. But yeah, I think that they were pretty high level in terms of what they were doing. But so yeah, they're going to show the most robust effects. But yeah, so this group was essentially looking at what are the highest level physically active older individuals compared to what we define as sedentary older individuals, because if there's an effect, we're going to see it between those two groups. What they did not look at was all of us in between those two extreme groups. But other studies have looked at people who are not on the outlier ends of that spectrum of physical activity. What appears to be the case is more physical activity is certainly better, but you get the greatest effects with just going from sedentary to that recommended 3 times a week of regular engagement in physical activity. So 3 times 20 to 30 minutes a week. You'll see the most robust effects in terms of your brain blood flow increase at that point, and all of the other things musculoskeletally that happen at that, and going from sedentary to regular exercise. And then everything else from there is a little more incremental, although you still get benefits. So I don't know if that is helpful at all, and kind of what you might be getting at.
Right, thank you for taking time, very kind of you, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for that, Dr. Palmer.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thanks for taking that last question for us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. All right, you have a good day.
Thanks, you too. And thanks everyone for joining. See you next week.
Okay, bye.
Right, thank you.